Welcome, good morning. Welcome to Bridges of Belonging. This is conversation number 13. I'm Andrea Carey. I'm the Chief Inclusion Officer with Inclusion Incorporated. And I'm so excited to welcome our two guests today. We have Marg McGregor and Lucha Villar, who I will introduce to you in just a moment. I do want to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, on whose lands I've been really grateful to be a guest living, working, and playing over the last 25 years I've lived here, and on acknowledging the nations of the Songhees and the Esquimalt peoples who've been such incredible stewards of this land. We are on Zoom, and so we have asked everyone to mute yourself and turn off your video so that we can really focus on the messages from our speakers, but we do welcome conversation in the chat box and questions as we go throughout the dialogue, so please engage with us that way and ask our speakers any questions you'd like to learn about them as we navigate these vulnerable conversations around belonging. And just also to acknowledge that we are recording this session, so your presence here will be captured for our future playback audience. So again, just a huge welcome to Marg and to Lucha. I've had the opportunity to work with both of them in various ways, but really looking forward to learning a lot more about them today on this session. Lucha and I had the opportunity to work together on a women's leadership project with 14 Paralympic nations last year, leading up to the 2019 Peru Pan and Para-Pan Games in Lima. And she's just an incredible leader in the Paralympic system in Peru and across the Americas. So really excited to have you here, Lucha. And Marg McGregor works for the Canadian Olympic Committee and has been there for quite a long time, 8 years, and is the Director of Sports System Excellence, and has really been engaged in the safe sport conversations around diversity and inclusion, and really in supporting our national sport organizations and a whole variety of initiatives, including some women's leadership initiatives. So welcome to both of you. So excited to take this journey with you. And we'll flip it over to Lucha to kick us off with a little bit more about herself.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you, Andrea, and thank you for being able to be here at Bridge of Belongings. I'm from Peru. My name is Luisa, but if you call me Luisa, I will not turn around because my nickname is Lucha. So I'm a PE teacher. I work at the American School in Lima for the last 25 years. I have a degree in education, and I am a swim coach and a para-swim coach. I have the honor to be the first president for the NPC Peru. I was able to lead the organization, as Andrea mentioned, for the Lima, Panama, and Para-Pan Games, who are very proud of those games. And at the moment, I'm a member of the International IPC Committee in Education and a member of the IOC Committee in Sports and Active Society. So I'm looking forward for our conversation, and right now as well, because I believe that sports is for everybody, I'm studying a master's degree in adapted physical education. So thank you for the invitation, Andrea.
Thank you, Lucha. And one of Lucha's many talents is that during all of our conversations with the many Paralympic nations, as I referenced, she ended up playing a bit of a translator role. So she flips between Spanish and English beautifully. And so that's something I highly admire about her as well. So welcome, Lucha. Over to you, Marg, to share a little bit more about you.
Thanks, Andrea. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with everyone today. And it's so important to have that platform and to have these kinds of discussions and to learn from one another. The question, tell us a little bit about you. Who are you? It was an interesting one to kind of pause and reflect on that. I guess I would say that ultimately I'm an advocate for change, and I really believe in the power of sport to change people's lives. In terms of my backstory, I grew up in Peterborough, Ontario. I was the youngest of 4 children in my family, and I grew up surrounded by strong, powerful women role models in my home. My mom was a community activist with a revolutionary spirit. She was a real fearless mover and shaker for social change. And I have memories of sitting around our kitchen table, listening to Mom strategize about various campaigns she would get engaged in. So the golf club in my hometown didn't allow women to play. So Mom worked tirelessly to allow them to admit women as members, and then they didn't allow Jewish women as members. So Mom worked on that front, and she was always engaged in something, whether it was fundraising for causes or keeping the local high school open. She was a teacher at the community college in my community, and there is now a bursary in her name, which allows supports single women to pursue their education. And so she really taught me to use my voice and to honor the spirit of those who fought before me, and to use the platform that I had. So she had real attitude and style. So that's what I grew up with. My sisters were firsts. One of my sisters was one of 4 female law students in her class at University of Toronto Law School at the time. Another one of my sisters founded a World Veterinary Association and wrote a book about women in politics. So that's sort of the milieu, the DNA that in my background. In terms of my work life, I've worked in sport leadership for my entire career. I was Chief Executive Officer at CAUSE, Canadian Association for Women in Sport, which is now Canadian Women in Sport. So I learned a lot about equity issues and gender issues there. Was Chief Executive Officer at Canadian Inter-University Sport, which is now U Sport Canada. Worked at the athletics department at Dalhousie University for a few years, and have worked at a number of national sport organizations in Canada, Water Ski Canada, Synchro Canada, and Gymnastics Canada. As you mentioned, I've been with the COC, the Canadian Olympic Committee, for 8 years, and I work in the System Excellence team, which is a group of there's about 10 of us in that unit who focus on really important files, like diversity and inclusion, like women's leadership, like anti-harassment, anti-doping, and athlete wellness and athlete transition. In terms of my volunteer life, I have volunteered in sport all my life. I had the privilege to be Canada's chef de mission for the Canadian team at the Paralympic Games in Torino, and also the Commonwealth Games in Manchester. So that was a real thrill to wear the maple leaf and to lead the team. I have a master's from McGill University, master's in leadership and crisis management. And in terms of other interests, my mom was blind and my nephew is blind. So disability access is something that's very important to me and near and dear to me. And my family has fostered over 10 guide dogs for the blind over the years. So as difficult as it was to say goodbye to those little puppies, it was always comforting to know that they were going for a higher cause to support someone who was blind. And my family is also, my nephew is an organ donor recipient and my brother is an organ donor. So organ donation is something that's very important to me. And finally, and most importantly, I'm a mom of 2 pretty fantastic daughters. So that's, in a nutshell, that's who I am, and yeah, that gives you a bit of a snapshot.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Marg. How amazing that must have been to grow up in a home where your mom was sort of doing that kitchen table advocacy work to really make some shifts in your community. It must have been a really rich learning experience.
It was, for sure. Yeah. And it was just part of what one did. I didn't think it was extraordinary at the time, but looking back on it, my mom was a feminist far before it was cool to be a feminist, and she truly was ahead of her time. Yeah. And communicated that to all of us.
No, that's amazing. Lucha, I'm going to circle back to you because you mentioned you're just embarking on your master's degree to kind of further your education and background in an area that you're already obviously contributing a whole lot to with para swim coaching and also with being president of the Peru Paralympic Committee. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about sort of your journey, as how you got involved with Paralympics, and what led you to want to further your education in that space, and why you're so passionate about that space?
I guess, as Margie was telling, you know, when you think about it, how or why do I got involved? I have to mention that when I was 3 years old, my mom suffered a brain tumor. So she had to go to the States, and she was there for a whole year. We were lucky that my dad worked for the Air Force, so he was transferred there. And she got operated, and they took away a tumor who was as big as the fist of a man. She had to learn how to walk again. She was in coma for 3 months. And I guess when she came back and we were very, very little, we had to bear with that. My mom couldn't walk correctly, that she had to go to therapy every day. And thinking about how did I got involved, I think she was the first person who showed me about disability. We used to go with her to the rehabilitation center that she had to go daily. So in our holidays, we help her going there. And she as well was maybe not a feminist, but back on the 50s, she was one of the 5 women who got into the engineer university, where there were 500 males, and they will tell her, why are you doing here? Why don't you go and marry yourself? What are you doing here? Go and fry potatoes, you know? So I guess that example and that strength, I have to take it from her and from my grandmother, who as well was a teacher and worked all her life. So I guess I have good examples with that. And regarding the disability, I guess that was the first mentor I had, you know. And as I study physical education, where as well back in the 80s, not everybody study PE, and not everybody said, what are you going to do for a living if you study PE? You know, that is for people who have no brains. And that was literally friends of mine telling me that. But for me, was everything I liked was PE, you know, was the best thing I did at school. I always did sports. And I had my first opportunity to be with the disability itself when I was living in England, where I was a volunteer working in the special schools, and I was teaching them swimming. So I think that was my first direct contact with that. And when I came back to live in Peru, because I was able to live in many countries overseas, and I was hired at the American school Lima, who I'm working now for the last 25 years, that was the first thing I wanted to do on the curriculum. I wanted to make sure our students learn that PE is for everybody, regardless if you have a disability or not. So we create the program, Building Awareness Sports for Everybody, where we show them different para sports. We brought people who maybe had an accident, but life has to continue. So these kids learn what is empathy. And since they're going to be the future, this is an international school, but I think they need to learn from primary that disability is not an incapacity, you know, that there's things that needs to be adapted. And that's how I got involved with the Paralympic movement. One of the first swimmer in Peru, her sister used to swim with me. And that's how I got introduced with support for traveling. They invite me to be part of the 2004 Paralympic Games, and my job was to get everything a year before, and everything meant tickets, everything. Since you know how it works, if you don't have an NPC, there's no budget that the government can give you. So that was my first lection of life, as I call it, you know, because being on the Paralympic Games was like, whoa, there's so much we can do. And that's how my journey started with that, you know. It took us 12 years to make the Paralympic committee. And on that time, I was a Paralympic coach. I was able to travel, to learn, and that's how my passion, and that's how I got involved and fall in love with that now I'm the president for the last 5 years. And I wanted to keep studying and to be better so I can get here in Peru more opportunities for more people. And that's how I'm studying now the master's on that.
Oh, what a great journey. Thank you for sharing that. And talk about being in the trenches and kind of building something from the ground up. You know, in Canada, I feel like many of our systems have existed for a little bit longer, so we haven't had some of those opportunities to kind of build from the ground up. Not to say we don't have a whole lot of work here to do still here in Canada, as I'm sure Marg can attest to, but yeah, to build the Paralympic Committee from scratch, that's an amazing journey. So applause to you for the tenacity and perseverance to get that done. Marg, I'm going to flip back to you. I'm interested in sort of, as you've gone through your journey in sport and as a leader in the system and kind of coming from feminist roots, tell us a little bit about sort of how feminism showed up for you in that journey and what that meant in terms of your belonging journey.
Well, equity and access has always been something that's really important, and I would sort of fight to the death for that. And fairness and equity are sort of my non-negotiables, and disrupting the status quo just seems to be part of my DNA, this revolutionary spirit that was passed down to me. So it's always been an important part of the work that I've done, even though many of my positions have not been exclusively related to diversity and inclusion or access. That element has always been front and center for me, and I just, you know, I can't seem to separate it. I have that lens in everything that I do, because Lucha used the words to fall in love with. Like I really have fallen in love with sport. I know the impact that sport done well can have on people, the transformative impact it can have on people's lives. And I also know that's not always the case. And there's times when it can be, you know, quite the opposite if it's not done well and people are left on the sidelines or made to feel that they don't belong. So, and I think we're at an extraordinary moment in time right now in our crazy world, an opportunity to make important changes. And the pandemic, for all of its negative impacts, it's really vaulted us forward in several ways. So in a matter of weeks, we have learned how to use Zoom and connect differently. And we're sort of at this confluence of the health crisis, the financial crisis, and the social crisis. So it's created an opportunity for change, a galvanizing moment, and this opportunity for all of us to reimagine and reinvent a new normal or a better normal where people are welcomed and valued and nurtured. And as you say, the Canadian sports system has made some significant progress, particularly in the areas of women in sport and LGBTQ inclusion. However, like, we're so far from the finish line. That said, I'm really motivated by a strong sense of what's to come. And we know our system has lots of work to do. And diversity and inclusion is extremely complex, but you know, I think it's in a really exciting time in our country and in the world, and that's what sort of matters to me now.
Well, I'm going to circle back to the question around sort of how that fits with your belonging journey in a second, because I'm going to flip to Lucha and just connect with her around, you know, in your journey of Paralympics and what that meant to you. You referenced, and Marg just referenced it again, sort of that falling in love. And so I'm curious about sort of what caused you to fall in love with it? Was it the athletes? Was it the passion? Was it the feeling like you belonged in that environment?
Well, first, I remember the experience of being on a game. I guess I fall in love from the beginning. I started teaching at school. And every year it was, okay, I was waiting for that 2 weeks of October to see what am I going to teach the kids now. And just for you to understand, I was teaching kids from 3 years old until 12 years old. And they were able to be 4 times per week during 40 minutes for a class, where we divided doing a kind of a circuit of 2 activities each day. And we show them a video at the beginning, at the end, and we always, we brought para-athletes to share with them, to play with them. We invite the director, and the middle school and high school students as well, we invite them to be part of. So I guess that was the first, as I said, fall in love, that I want to do more. And why? Looking at the faces of the para-athletes when they perform, I think was what make it, I can do and I want to do something. Even though the journey we know is not an easy one, there's a lot to change. There's a lot of paradigms to change, a lot of education that needs to be given. I started reading a lot about all the sports, all the different countries that have the games. Actually, I use many times the Canadian program that you have for schools, you know, so I was taking ideas from them. And I guess that's where I thought, and I think that's why I belong. I belong here, that I can do, and I can help that little difference, you know. For us, this is a non-payment work. My work is a PE teacher, but I think it's the best I can give here in life to try to support and make the Paralympic movement grow and leave some foundations.
Excellent, thank you. So in terms of Lucha, your belonging journey, Paralympics is one place you belong, but tell us about some other places you belong and sort of what that's looked like for you.
Well, I have done sports all my life, and I have been a swimmer. I have represent Peru in swimming. And of course, I belong with my family. I think family is the first thing. Without the support of the family, I wouldn't be here. They already know that my blood is Paralympics. So they know when I am busy, they know when I'm doing something, they know when I'm stressed, and they know. It's like, you know, feeding, eating, changing, because they say you work more for the Paralympics than from your own stuff. But I think the family is, for me, is the best. I have my mom and dad already passed away, but we are we are 3 sisters and 2 brothers, and I guess they taught us to pursue our passion, to do the best we can. They taught us to learn. If you fail, you can stand up. And we all are different. We all have different careers, but they always taught us to just, you need to be somebody. You need to help somebody. Never, I remember my mom always saying, you never envy if there's somebody who have more. You have to be thankful because you have more than somebody else, you know? And those are small lections that I always, now that I'm old, you know, you say, oh, I wish I can have my mom and tell that how important all her phrases and everything has been in all my years. You know?
And what about you, Marg? Tell us a little bit about sort of your belonging journey and what that's looked and felt like for you.
Yeah, well, much like Lucha, the support of family has been really critical to just give me my wings and know that there would be soft landings when things go wrong, and they will in this line of work. And so just, you know, knowing that you have that support makes such a difference. And also that similar to Lucha, you know, being grateful for what you have. And I guess in today's words, that would be recognizing privilege. And using your voice. So I guess when I reflected on your question of when I felt like I belonged, I mentioned I was executive director at CAUSE, Canadian Association for Women in Sport, for about a decade earlier in my career. And I can say that the women I had the privilege of working with really invited me in and welcomed me and expressed themselves and empowered me to learn more. I certainly I wasn't deep on knowledge of equity issues at the time. So people like Marion Lay and Bryna Coppolo and Pat Hunt, they were, you know, strong women. They gave me the safe space to learn and grow and make mistakes. And when I worked at University Sport, there were a couple of women, Wendy Bedingfield and Judy McRae, I like to name them. And same thing there, that was the first time I had been CEO of a university sport organization. So I had a lot to learn at the front end, and that was the first time they had had a female CEO. And I took some fairly unpopular decisions in my first, I'd say, first year on the job, where the funding, the vast majority of the funding of the organization was going towards men's football. And there were 17, 18 other sports that weren't getting the same sort of support from the organization. So there was the funding redistribution program, and certainly many other sports were on the receiving end of getting additional support. And, you know, unfortunately it was a zero-sum game at the time. So there was less support for men's football, which, as you can imagine, was not a very popular decision at the time. So having people in your court to buffer some of the blowback that one gets, I think is really important for belonging. And again, just, you know, knowing you've got that safety net for you. Certainly being an advocate for social change can be tremendously rewarding, and also it can be tremendously isolating. And you know, you can't do it alone. It has to be a team sport. And so belonging to that sort of network of people who share the passion for inclusion is really important, and who will lead the pack at different moments so that you can drop back and draft in front of others, and vice versa. And unfortunately in Canada, like, there are so many exceptional leaders who are working in this space, like Karen O'Neill, who's CEO, Lucha, you know Karen, CEO of Canadian Paralympic Committee, is doing outstanding work. Lorraine Lafreniere, CEO of the Coaching Association of Canada, doing great work in the safe sport space and women in coaching space. Alison Sandmeyer-Graves doing great work leading Canadian women in sport. Within the Canadian Olympic Committee in Canada, Tricia Smith is our president, amazing leader. Martha Deacon, like, there's a long list of really strong, powerful women leaders who support one another and just make the work that we do a team sport, and give that sort of sense of you belong, you're an important part of the team.
Yeah, thank you for naming names. I know it's an important opportunity to recognize some of our colleagues and those that support us and are our allies around the tables. Lucha, I'm going to flip back to you to tell us about a time when you didn't belong and what that felt like and how you journeyed through that.
There was a time when we came back from Athens 2004, and we saw that nothing was changing here. So it was kind of I said, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I and keep doing my project at school, you know, that's what it takes my time. I will continue coaching, and I was coaching the para swimmer. Because it was like, you know, having walls all the time, having walls in front of you, and I don't know how, maybe it was a year like that, you know, that I said, no, I don't want to feel that way. I don't want to be in this place where if I can do something, regardless if it's many walls, I think we can cross those walls. And I think that was the moment, you know, that when I felt I don't want to do this, but then, I don't know, I think from God or somebody, they say, no, Lucha, you have to go back. So that's what I did.
Thank you for sharing. Marg, I'm going to flip back to you and ask you the same question about a time when you didn't belong.
These are really interesting questions that makes you dive into some painful places. And I guess I'm reflecting, this is a long time ago for me. I was identified as being academically gifted in grade 4, grade 5, whatever. And so was streamed into a gifted program for grade 5 to grade 8. And it was called the Major Work Program. And I'm sure nowadays they do this more eloquently than they did at the time. But anyway, the Major Work Program, it wasn't fair. And so we were pulled out of our schools, centralized in a different school across town, and named the Major Works. And it didn't take very long before that major work title morphed into Major Jerks. We were called the Major Jerks. And, you know, it was, you know, just, you know, a painful kind of thing, and a reminder that words matter, that words can be quite inclusive or words can be quite painful. And so that really stung at, at the time, and, you know, sort of singed in my brain. And I wish that I wasn't smart, you know, of all things. Like later on in life, when you look back and think, oh, no, you should be celebrating your gifts. But I just wished I wasn't as smart. And then years later, I went back in my 40s and did my MBA. And I was surrounded by what I thought was, you know, people who are all smarter than me. And I wished I was smarter. So, you know, in both of those occasions, there was always sort of this feeling of, oh, I don't really belong, and that can really sting. And you know, when you ask sort of how did I work my way through that, it often involves chocolate icing and a spoon. You just shovel it in, and from time to time having a good cry. Like, you know, you'll often hear, oh, don't take things personally, and I don't agree with that. I think taking things personally means that you're passionate about things, and that's okay. You know, go away and have a good cry, and then pick yourself up and dust yourself off. And I have the expression groan and move on. Like, there's just times when that's all one can do is kind of groan and move on.
And hope you have fellow groaners in your corner.
That's right, who will share my chocolate icing with me.
Exactly. I'm a big fan of icing myself. I'm going to just sort of go on a little bit of a segue here for a second, just because I didn't know Lucha's story about her mom and the brain tumor, but one of my journeys in not belonging was that I actually had a brain tumor at age 17. And at the time I was living in another country and had this whole sort of journey of trying to navigate there, and then having to come home and deal with a major health crisis and navigate through that at age 17. So yeah, it just sort of struck a chord, and I thought, I'm going to share that vulnerable moment with this group because I know you'll appreciate it. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of belonging and self, and sort of your journey through appreciating your gifts and the talents you bring, and how smart you were, Marg, to sort of how that helped translate into figuring out those spaces and places where you did belong, and what you needed to then be successful in moving forward in those ways. So Margot, maybe start with you on that one.
Sure. I think that whole sort of notion of knowing where you belong or where you're comfortable is really important, and feeling visible and feeling respected. That's, you know, so absolutely key to moving forward in life. And, you know, I think reflecting back as well, in one of my jobs, it was a very, there was a lot of golf was played as part of, and it wasn't the sport of golf, but just golf was embedded into how people networked and how people socialized and how business was transacted. And my golf swing defies the laws of physics, and not in a good way. And it's just not, you know, to the extent that I've rolled a golf cart before, like, it's just bad. It's not just like I'm neutral, like I'm really bad. And that was another place where, you know, it just wasn't quite feeling that I belonged in that space. And so I guess, you know, it's finding other spaces where your gifts can shine, and finding other people who, who you know, have the patience and the spirit to let you shine and let your gift shine through is really important. And I try to do that as a leader in the organizations that I work with, and the people that I work with, is just creating in the language that I use. I guess I referred back to language being before as being so very powerful, and trying to be sensitive to and use words that include, and people can see themselves reflected in the language, as opposed to not, whether it's, as you did, an Aboriginal or territorial acknowledgement at the beginning, or using your personal pronouns. Just really, I think, important things to do to value people. I think meetings is another really important area where if you're in charge of a meeting, you can create space for people to express their points of view. And not just the people who naturally are extroverts and who will jump in and speak, but inviting others into the conversation who might not naturally participate. So to create that opportunity and so giving people visibility and giving people recognition. I saw you wrote a blog, Andrea, on microaggressions, and our life is flooded with those death by 1,000 cuts. And just again, I try and celebrate the little acts of kindness, the little things that have gone well. And so to kind of counteract the microaggressions that are happening. And sport is historically anyway, a very male dominated construct. In Baron de Coubertin in 1896, when he founded the modern Olympic Games, said that women had a role to play, and that role was to applaud the performances of men. So, that's where it started from. By the year 2024, the Olympic program will be gender equitable in terms of number of events for men and women. So that, that took a long time to get there, from applauding the performances to an equitable opportunities. So there is still a lot of vestiges of that. The leadership of sport has a long way to go before it is truly representative of the population. So, and our media coverage is certainly very sexist in its choice of language and images for women, and it perpetuates women as pin-ups. The prize money isn't equitable, the percentage of coverage of women in sport. So lots of work to do. Our halls of fame in Canada, both the Canadian Olympic Hall of Fame and Canada Sport Hall of Fame, there's a disproportionate number of men. So we need to celebrate and amplify the accomplishments of Black, Indigenous, people of color, and women, and really shine the light on things. So that's a little bit over the map melange of stream of consciousness. Not sure whether I answered the question or not, but just shared a little bit of reflections with you. And one other thing I would say is you mentioned that at the COC, for the past couple of years, we've run a Women in Leadership program, and it's called the WELD program, Women Emerging Leadership Development. I think there's a few welders on the call today. And it's been really, and so this is, developing the pipeline of talent to be able to move into CEO roles in sport. And I have to say that, the issues that we were dealing with when I was executive director of CAUSE, I guess it's 20 or so years ago, and the issues that the women are facing now haven't really changed all that much. So it's just, it is a reminder that yes, we have come a long way, and yet there's still a long way to go for I would say the women are certainly, they're exceptionally talented and wonderful leaders, and many of them, still are working in organizations that need some enhancements in order to create the right environment where all people, all employees can really feel valued and welcome and really have the space to shine.
Whoa, that was a whole bunch of pieces. I'm going to flip the question back to Lucha and then kind of tie us back together between your two answers, I think, because there was so many pieces there. I want to sort of see where Lucha goes and then be able to navigate from there. So Lucha, I'm going to flip it over to you to talk about sort of self and belonging and how learning about yourself allowed you to facilitate your bridge to belonging.
Well, first, as Marg was mentioned, if we talk about equality, Canada is far, far away from us. Just to give you an example, back in 2015, there was no one NPC in Peru. When Peru won the Lima Games was actually in Toronto in 2013. And that's why we were very happy, saying, oh, now they know they have to do the Para Games, but it took them 2 years to realize that they needed to have an NPC in order to receive the flag at the Toronto's Games. And I think that was a little bit hard to make understand, because not even the terminology they were aware. You know, they will use handicap, minusvalid, words that is not anymore on the dictionary, and that was a big journey to make them understand. And regarding equality, gender equality, I believe if you are a male or a female, you should have the same opportunities. Being male or female is not going to make it do a better job or a bad job. We have males who do good jobs, but males who do bad jobs, and the same thing happens with the females. It's just to have the same opportunities, you know, as we talk a lot about that equity. Right now in Peru, maybe we are only 3 women who are members of a president of a federation. As I said, for me, Canada is an example that I always check and guide. I was really impressed. And I can tell you a story. When I met Karen, it was on my first games as NPC Peru, was on the Junior Parapan Games in Sao Paulo. And she was speaking about the women in the APC. And as soon as she finished talking, I got into her, I introduced myself, and I said, okay, how can I do it? How can I be part of? Because I believe we need to have this opportunity. So looking at myself, I have learned to patience. I have learned to listen. You know, when you are young, you are more explosive, and sometimes that's how teenagers are. People, when they are young, you know, they think they own the truth. And on my job at school as well, that I work in a big school, I have learned not to take personal the things, but take it in a proactive way. You know, I believe in constructive criticism, and I believe in constructive and assertive communication. And I think it's one of the things I try to apply now, to try, as Margaret said, to listen, to give positive reinforcement. I teach teenagers, and it's so important, the positive reinforcement, and to teach them that, you know, it's okay to make mistakes. In life, we are going to make a lot of mistakes, but it's important to recognize them and to see, okay, how can I do it better? You know, and that's the whole point. Do a self-evaluation on us all the time, you know, how can I do that better? Did I do it correctly? And I guess many times it can happen to us. Oh, maybe I didn't answer the correct way. You know, oh, maybe that was too tough. Oh, I shouldn't be more aggressive next time, you know. But I think it's important to learn what are your gaps, what are the things you need to work, because that's what we are here for, to try to get better every time, you know. I don't know as well if I answered the question.
They're really interesting answers, regardless if you answered or not. But both of you did. Yeah, it makes me reflect on the quote by Maya Angelou about when you know better, do better. And I actually used that to kick off a blog a few weeks ago around inclusive leadership, because it's just such an opportunity for us to grow and learn together. And to Marg's earlier point, you know, we're in the middle of a health, financial, and social crisis with like unbelievable change coming at us, sometimes minute to minute, let alone sort of over the periods of time that we've become accustomed to. And it just creates such an unbelievable dynamic in the various systems that we're used to operating in, but also such an opportunity. So Marg, I'm going to flip back to you, because you spoke about sort of the changes the changes you've tried to inspire over time, but that we really haven't seen a whole lot of progress. And here we are at a time in our history where there is just such a huge opportunity in front of us to learn from this and to do different and to do better. And, you know, in the thick of our sports system, what do you see that looking like, and how do we facilitate belonging, cultures of belonging being part of that?
Yeah. Well, I think the using the platform in this moment is really important, and giving visibility and amplifying voices to people who typically have not been visible or being heard is so important, and somewhat, somewhat easy. Like there's so many Black, Indigenous, people of color, women who are doing incredible things. And yet, we kind of default in the media and on social channels to the traditional coverage of male professional sport. So that to me is an easy pivot, and and an authentic one, not just done for tokenism, but there's so many remarkable stories out there. If you look right now at the NBA and how and the Raptors in particular, how they're using their platform to advance Black Lives Matter, and how Masai and the Raptors are just doing, naming in such a powerful and honest way the police brutality and the racism and the stuff that's just got to stop. Like, athletes and sport, we do have the eyes of the world are on us. So we do have that platform that we can use with an intentionality. And I firmly believe it's a moment in time, and it's not just a moment that trivializes it, because people have been working in this areas for years and years. But there is an awakening of far more people who realize that, what's been happening isn't good enough. And I guess, we can credit social media to that. When you can watch 9 minutes of police murdering someone, that, as horrifying as that is, it is also eye-opening. And, and the organization of Black North Initiative and Black Lives Matter, and there's a number of great organizations out there who are there to help other organizations know, or Canadian Women in Sport right now, they've just launched an e-learning tool about applying gender lens in national sport organizations. So I think that with the appetite and the willingness to make some changes, that there's some, great resources out there. And, it is a long game, but at the same time, I think we need to be impatient and use the opportunity now to chip away and make some progress, whether it's within how we recruit people to lead organizations, what nominating committees look like, how we define diversity, what kind of skills are we looking for when we recruit diverse boards, how we recruit interns into national sport organizations, because that's sort of the pipeline of talent in NSO. So it's really, it's a relook at what we're doing. Some of the work I'm involved with COC right now is we are developing a diversity and inclusion strategy 2.0 for the next quad. And we're just looking, at everything we do within the organization. How can we be better? How can we do better? How can we be better from a diversity and inclusion lens? So it's as simple as examples of, our supplier chain, who we buy our supplies from, who we have regular, we bring in breakfasts on Monday mornings for the staff, like who we can source the purchasing of breakfast from small business owners who may be in the LGBTQ community or the Black and Indigenous people of color, just as easily as we can buy from the global national grocery store down the street. Like, those tiny acts can make a difference. And the language that we use, or how we invite people, or how we describe our organization, how we amplify voices, I think there's lots of opportunities if we speak with respect and learn with an open heart and tap into the expertise that exists in the community to help move forward in this space.
Amazing. And what an opportunity, COC, with the leadership and the clout and the following that you have, to be such a tremendous leader in the space and kind of show organizations how it can be done, and doing so with the sort of allied organizations that you have across the system. Lucha, I'm going to flip the same question to you around sort of power of sport and the opportunity in these times for sport to be a vehicle for change and to create cultures of belonging.
Well, definitely having the Pan Am and Parapan Games in Lima 2019 has been before the Para Games and after the Para Games. Many people, when Lima won the place, and they were kind of afraid that, the games are not going to be ready and they shouldn't be doing the games, because it was a year before that we had a crisis with the rains and everything. So many Congress people will say, why do you spend so much money in sports? For me, I think they are the best thing they have done, because regarding the para sport, as Margaret was saying about the media, we never been so much exposed in life that at that time. People and many schools that we did programs with all the schools around the different facilities were able to meet the para athletes to participate, you know, in some activities, and to learn that sports is for everybody, and that we as well can have, you know, high performance in para athletes that not even people on the sport institute were aware of the different sports, you know. So I think the para sport is maybe one of the major tools we have to take advantage to change how people think about people with disability, and to change as well of giving opportunities to everybody, regardless if you are boy or girl. But I think more people, unless, I mean, in Peru at least, they didn't know about para sport. So they were afraid of even be a coach, you know, or how can I coach a person with a disability? Because the education system at the universities have nothing regarding, or very few regarding, of para sports. So the opportunity of having the games have opened the window that we needed, and we want to hold on that. Right now we did a year from the Parapan Games on the 24th, and the media has done videos regarding after a year, what do we get, you know, so people still remember, and that's what we want to go from that, you know. We want to make sure more counties take advantage of this, and to try to have more opportunities on the different places. It's a long journey, because I don't know if you are aware, but Peru is not a place that is accessible. There's no a bus that is accessible that a person in a wheelchair can just. Transportation is really very hard. We had it on the games, but because the buses were made for that, for the games, you know, it's not that they stood that way. So there's a long journey, but I think the para sport is the great tool, and the athletes are the best one, and very powerful when we take them to give message, because the kids understand that, oh, if he has a disability that me, and he's doing a sport, I as well can do it, you know. And one of the good things about the games was that many companies, they contact us to try to hire people with disability on their, it was something good thanks to the games, you know.
Wow, so what a powerful social change tool the games have been in Peru, and it sounds like they continue to be as you tell the stories and sort of see the shifts in some of the companies that exist there. Yeah, that's amazing. You must be so proud of your work. You should be so proud of your work.
Yes.
We've certainly seen with past Paralympic and Para-Pan Am Games that it's been such an opportunity to kind of shift people's attitudes and understandings about what disability means and what the abilities are of people with disabilities, not just in sport, but across society. So that's a really cool ripple effect for you to be experiencing right now. So we're at a point where we're going to do last words. So I'm going to turn it back to each of you to do a little bit of a wrap up about sort of where you see belonging going forward. And I forgot to read our quote at the beginning of today, the reading that I always do. So I'm going to wrap up with that after you each do a last word. So Lucha, do you want to lead us off with the last word?
Okay. What do belonging takes me forward is just to keep pursuing my passion, and that's okay to discover new passions. We never too old to discover new things and to try new things. I think and I think it happens to everybody, you know, suddenly you realize, oh, I didn't know I had this, I wanted to do this, you know. So I think it will be that, you know, to pursue your passion, to try new things, keep doing the things that you are doing and are helpful for others, you know, don't give up on those ones, but try to have a balanced life as well, you know, because sometimes we get so excited with so many things and we forget that, okay, we need to have a time for everything, a time to relax, a time to cry if we need to, you know, a time to exercise, because in order to be doing all these, it's very important to be healthy. And I think that I will be saying that, pursue your passion.
Beautiful, I love it. Marg, over to you for a last word.
Thank you. Well, I think it's been said, you know, social change, sport is a really important social change tool, and the games can be an important social change tool. And I recall in Sochi at the Winter Olympic Games where it was not a comfortable environment for our LGBTQ athletes, and COC was kind of silent at the time on that, and subsequent to that recognized that that was a gap and this was an opportunity for us to do more in that space. And so have done more work with our One Team program and our BU program. So it you know, again, sport gives us that opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. And so I guess my concluding remarks were just to use that platform, use that voice. Don't go it alone. It has to be a team sport. So work with others and they'll be there to pick you up when things go wrong. And it's not a one-off event. Diversity will happen with many voices and many actions, and with all of us doing a little bit to make the world a better place.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that. And what a pleasure to have both you and Lucha, who have been leading change in your roles and in your lives throughout many, many years now, and being able to contribute to the changes that we're seeing. So thank you to both of you for the hard work and the heavy lifting you do and continue to do. And really grateful that you were both able to join us here today. So I'm going to wrap up with a reading. So this is one of my favorite books. Richard Wagoneese is a Indigenous author, and this whole book is just a series of sort of short pieces that he shared. So I'm going to read one right now. So I'm not here in this life to be well balanced or admired. I'm here to be an oddball, eccentric, different, wildly imaginative, creative, daring, curious, inventive, and even a tad strange at times. I'm here to pray and chant and meditate and sing and find creator in a blues riff, a sunrise, a touch, or the laughter of children. I'm here to discover me in all of that. I'm here to add chunky, clunky, and funky bits of me to the swirl and swagger and churn of life and living. It demands I be authentic. So when I look out in the world, that's me dancing in the fields. So thank you to both of you for dancing in the fields with all of us today. And I'm just going to share our upcoming guests, which are on September 8th. We have the amazing Scout Bassett, who is a Paralympian from the US, from Team USA in athletics, joining us. And I know Lucha knows her. We actually got to do a women's leadership presentation about a month and a half ago when I'm at Scout, and she's just a firecracker. So I'm super excited to have her join us. And Wanda Deschamps, who runs a company called Liberty Co. That looks at neurodiversity, and also runs an organization called Women for Women, holding women up and supporting each other. So I think they're going to be a pretty dynamic duo, and that's on September 8th at 11. And folks can join us by registering on the website. So again, thank you so much to Lucha and Marg. A really awesome conversation, and just really appreciated you both being here and sharing and supporting each other in the conversation, and to our audience for joining us. And stay safe, everyone, and take care.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. My pleasure. Here's to oddballs.
Thank you very much.